So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of Perk Class Setup. In this series, what I do is I take a selection of a few perks and throw them into what is going to have to be a creator class setup. Each episode is completely different, and the purpose of having this series is to show you guys some perk class setups that you can use in your zombies game. It can be a perk class setup that makes you faster, a perk class setup that actually makes you stronger, or just one completely out of the ordinary. So in today's episode, what we're going to be looking at is a perk class setup I like to call the Juggernaut. But before we get into this, guys, I really would like to shoot for 500 likes on this video, as you guys really enjoyed the last perk class setup I did on the channel. So 500 likes is what we're going to be shooting for today, and if you guys want to see your perk class setup being shown on the channel, all you got to do is comment down in the comment section below. You need to leave the name of the perk class setup, the perks that are in the setup itself, and also some guns that will go well with the perks. But without further ado, guys, let's get into it. Alrighty, so starting off this perk class setup, the first thing we need to touch on is actually going to be guns, because we're going to need a selection of guns to actually allow us to stack up on points and then buy the perks. So let's get into guns. So the first gun you want to have is actually going to have to be the Forge Freeze. This is going to be a wonder weapon you can get around the map, and the way of doing it is by doing these little mini games to grab tickets, and once you have 500 tickets, all you got to do is go into the arcade and buy the weapon, and there you go. You got yourself a Forge Freeze. Now this weapon isn't a must-have, but it does go very nicely with the other weapons we're going to be using in this perk class setup. Alright, so for our secondary weapon, we have a choice of two guns that we can use, and the first gun is going to have to be the Raw, which is an LMG that does really have a lot of damage. The only downside with this weapon is the fire rate, but if you do use this weapon correctly with a few attachments, it will be very good, especially with the perks we're going to be using in this setup. But if you don't want a weapon with some slow fire rate, all you got to do is try and get the Titan out of the mystery wheel. This is another LMG, but the fire rate is a whole lot faster. So those are the two weapons you can use for secondaries. I do kind of suggest the Raw, as it is a little bit more powerful than the Titan with the boss zombies, which are called the Brute, but other than that, the Titan is amazing for points. So that's all the guns, but if you're wondering why are we using all of these big clunky weapons, it's because this perk setup actually isn't centered around speed or getting from A to B the quickest possible way. This setup is for the slower players who actually want to get to higher rounds without rushing around from corner to corner, because a quick tip about having these clunky weapons is you're not running around as fast as possible, which means you have a lot of time to kill the zombies. You're using these big clunky weapons that will give you a lot of damage, but it's going to slow you down a lot. But with all of that out of the way, we're going to be moving on to the perks itself. So what perks do we need for this setup to be successful? So the first one is pretty obvious. We're going to need Tough Enough, which if you guys didn't know, it's Juggernaut, and the name Juggernaut is based off Juggernaut, which means you can get a few extra hits. Now Tough Enough is a perk for every game, but just by having this perk, it makes it a whole lot easier. Another perk we're going to need is actually Bang Bangs. This makes any of the weapons I mentioned before, which is the Raw or the Titan, work to its full potential. It's not really going to affect the wonder weapon, which is the Forge Freeze, just because it's a wonder weapon, and Bang Bangs, or if you guys didn't know, it's double tap, doesn't really affect wonder weapons. And for the next perk, this one's a no-brainer. You will need Up and Atoms, which is quick revive, so when you go down, sure, you're gonna lose all your perks, but you can get back up and grab those guns out of the lost and found and continue with your game. But these next two perks are going to be something a little bit different. So a perk you're gonna need just to make your game a little bit more interesting will be Blue Bolt, and this is the Infinite Warfare version of Electric Cherry, which if you guys didn't know, if you're reloading any weapon that you're using at the time, an electric shock will come out from the weapon and somewhat affect the zombies. Now I would like to give a disclaimer that this perk doesn't really affect you as much as it would at the lower rounds than it would on the higher rounds, just because of the fact of it's a perk. It should shouldn't really be doing as much at the higher rounds. And the last perk we have on the list is going to be Mule Munchies, which allows us, the player, to grab a third weapon. But those are the 5 perks that you will need for this setup to be successful. Now, I would like to point out that this setup isn't about speed, so we didn't put quickies, which is speed cola, and we also didn't use racing stripes, which is stamina. Now, some of you may be thinking, why do we have Mule Munchies? What is the point of that? Now, that's because you need to get one more weapon for this setup to be successful. And this last weapon is a big one and is very quite effective. This is going to have to be the Mauler, and again, you do have to get this weapon out of the mystery wheel, but once you have it, it is a very hefty LMG. It does pack a lot of damage, and with bang bangs, this weapon is pretty much unstoppable. I would like to give a disclaimer that when you do go down, you will be losing your Mauler, so you can actually switch that with the Raw or the Titan. It depends on what weapon you want, but the Mauler is one of the best LMGs you can get in this game. Now, I do suggest pack-a-punching these LMGs not as soon as possible, but on the later rounds such as 20 to 25, just because the ammo count does get a little bit low when we do have more zombies that will be flowing through the rounds. But you don't really need to pack-a-punch the Forge Freeze, which is the Ice Gun Wonder Weapon, as soon as possible, just because of the fact you're not going to be using this weapon a lot, but you will be using this Wonder Weapon. So you've pretty much set up your perk strategy, your gun strategy, everything you need for this strategy to be successful you have at this moment. And now you may be thinking to yourself, where do we train? What is going to have to be the training strategy for the Juggernaut? So the strategy the Juggernaut likes to use is actually going to be located in the middle of the map. This is what I like to call the intersection, because there's 3 other locations you can go and open to go and turn on power and stuff like that, but we're going to be training in the middle of the map for a few reasons. First off, it's very open. Sure, there's other locations we could go to that might possibly be just a little bit wider, but the reason we're training in the middle is because there's no traps we can actually go and hit up, so that means we can't get stuck and eventually go down. So that's one of the main reasons that I actually chose the middle of the map to train. Surprisingly, it's actually pretty big, especially up at the back where Polar Peaks is. I mean, you can go and reload up there and use your weapons to its full potential and get out of there as quick and as easy as possible. Now again, as this is the Juggernaut Perk class setup, you will need to take it slow. So when zombies are kind of all clobbering up, all you gotta do is use your Forge Freeze to freeze the zombies, and then whip out your Raw, your Mauler, or your Titan and kill all the zombies and rinse and repeat. Now there is one con with this strategy, and that is the Brute, which is the zombie boss. But have no fear, because you have LMGs, you can easily take this bad boy out. And a gun I really do suggest with the Brute is the Raw. It's quite effective on pack-a-punch, but pack-a-punching this bad boy, killing the Brute, it's only gonna take a short amount of time on the lower round, which is before round 30. You also don't really need any double pack-a-punch abilities, as the LMGs are pretty overpowered by itself. And if you're wondering what happens when I do run out of ammo on my LMGs and don't get a max ammo, it's okay, because all you gotta do is trade them out for another weapon, try and get them out of the box again, and then pack-a-punch it, continue your strategy, and you'll eventually get to what is going to have to be somewhat of a higher round. Again, this isn't a high round strategy guide. This is just a perk class setup that is for the slower and more patient players. But anyway guys, hopefully you enjoyed that Juggernaut Perk class setup. If you did, be sure to smash a like on it. Shows you guys really supported the video. If you're new around here and want to stay up to date with all my zombies content, why not subscribe to never miss out on a brand new video of mine? And if you want to see your perk class setup being put into a video, all you got to do is actually comment it down in the comment section below. You need to comment the name and also the perks that are being used in the perk class setup itself, and maybe throw the guns in there too. I'm very curious. Tell me down in the comment section below. But that's going to be today's video guys. I'm going to be seeing you in the next one. Peace out and goodbye.